Mr. President, I rise today along with my colleague from New Hampshire, Senator Shaheen, to talk about the Energy Savings and Industrial Competitiveness Act. Now, this is one of those pieces of legislation that we ought to pass around here. It's bipartisan. It's good for the country. It's part of an energy plan for America that can help bring the jobs back, help fix our trade deficit, help make our manufacturers more competitive, help save taxpayers money, and actually help to clean the environment. That all sounds pretty good, doesn't it? And it does so without a single mandate. It does so without any new spending. It's fully offset. And in fact, I would make the strong argument it's going to save taxpayers a lot of money. Why? Because by putting energy efficiency in place in the federal government, the biggest user of energy in the world, we're going to see a lot of savings to all of us as taxpayers. Over the past several months, we've been working to clear a few last hurdles that stand in the way of passing this piece of legislation. I'm pleased to say that I believe from what I'm hearing from the other side of the aisle, and Senator Shaheen can talk more about this, that it looks like we're going to have a good shot to finally move this early next year. So before we leave for the holidays, I wanted to have a chance to talk about it a little bit, as Senator Shaheen did. I know Senator Wyden, who's here with us, the chairman, and Senator Murkowski, the ranking member of Energy, are all highly supportive of this legislation. After all, it got out of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee with a strong bipartisan vote, 19-3. This doesn't often happen with regard to energy policy around this place. This is one of those things where Republicans and Democrats alike can come together to do something good for our country. It's also important that we do it now because it gives the economy a shot in the arm at a time when we need it. There's a lot of talk in this place about all the above energy strategy. And to me, this fits perfectly with an all the above energy strategy. On this side of the aisle, we talk a little more about the production side. In other words, we ought to be using more of the energy that's in the ground in America right now, and I think we should. We should be producing more energy. At the same time, that energy that we produce, we should use more efficiently. And it has all those benefits we talked about earlier if you do that. We still import a lot of oil. In combination with China, it contributes to our trade deficit. In fact, the entire trade deficit, you could say, is due to both energy imports and trade with China alone. So by doing away with some of those energy imports, because we're using what energy we have more efficiently here, we're going to see lower trade deficits. The bill creates jobs, and that's why it's supported by over 260 trade associations and companies, including the Chamber of Commerce, National Association of Manufacturers, and others. But it's also good for the environment, which is why the coalition also includes the Alliance to Save Energy, the Sierra Club, and others. And again, a big reason why this passed the United States Energy and Natural Resources Committee with a bipartisan vote of 19-3. Simply put, the legislation that the senior senator from New Hampshire and I have worked on now for, 2.5 years, makes good environmental sense, it makes good energy sense, it makes good economic sense, it makes sense to help move this economy forward. I've visited with businesses and job creators all over my state of Ohio, and they tell me the same thing. Energy efficiency is critical to their ability to compete. And you think about it, we do live in a global economy. We live in an economy where we're competing in Ohio, not just with Indiana, but with India. And as a result, we've got to look at our cost of doing business. And one cost of doing business, of course, is labor. We don't want to compete with developing countries on labor rates. We want our labor rates to be good. We want benefits to be good. Another thing we could look at, of course, is the quality of our goods. We don't want to cut corners on the quality of the high quality of manufactured products we produce in this country. In fact, we want to be sure we're producing the best in the world. But energy is an area where we can cut costs. By making our manufacturers more competitive, by reducing their costs, we're going to be able to compete globally, add more jobs in this country, and again, be able to help on our trade deficit. That's why this legislation is so important, because what the federal government can do is help the private sector take advantage of the best research that's out there, the best practices that are out there, so that our companies can reduce their costs, putting those savings toward expanding companies, plant and equipment, hiring more workers. The proposals contained in this bill, I think, are very common sense reforms and have been needed for a long time. Again, no mandates on the private sector, none. In fact, many of our proposals come as a direct result from conversations we've had with people in the private sector as to what they actually want and need. That's how we put this thing together. It's also about how the federal government can become more energy efficient. We talked earlier about the fact the federal government's the largest user of energy in the world. Think about that. And our bill basically says, the federal government, why don't you start practicing what you preach? There's a lot of talk about green energy, green technology, and so on at the federal government level, but actually it turns out the federal government itself is inefficient. And we've got lots of studies that show that. More importantly, we've got ideas to make the federal government more efficient, less wasteful. It directs the Department of Energy to issue recommendations that employ energy efficiency on everything from computer hardware to operations and maintenance processes, energy efficiency software, power management tools. It also takes the common sense step of allowing the General Services Administration, that's the group that controls all the many federal buildings, offices, and so on. It allows them to update the building designs they've got right now in the works to meet new efficiency standards that have been developed since those designs were finalized. You can't do that now. That makes no sense. So look, the federal government's been looking for places to tighten its belt. Energy efficiency is a really good place to start. It'll save taxpayer money and help the environment in the process. All this adds up to a piece of legislation that Americans across the spectrum, the political spectrum, should be able to support. Again, fully offset, no mandates, requires the federal government to become more efficient. All this makes sense. What will the impact be? Well, there's a recent study of our legislation. It says that by 2025, the Sheehan-Portman legislation is estimated to aid in the creation of 136,000 new jobs while saving consumers $13.7 billion a year in reduced energy costs by the year 2030. It's the equivalent of taking millions of homes off the grid. It's equivalent of the entire energy use of the state of Oklahoma, for instance, if we just put some of these common sense efficiency standards in place. This legislation is not everything everybody wanted, okay? Some of the environmental groups would like to have gone further. Some of the business groups probably would like to see some other stuff that would help them. But this is legislation that is sensible. It will make a difference. It is bipartisan. It can pass in the United States Senate. Significantly, it can also be legislation that will be mirrored in the House of Representatives and passed. There is a bicameral interest in this. A number of House Democrats and Republicans are on board. They're interested in us moving this legislation in part so that they can then move that legislation in the House. We can get it to the President's desk for his signature. The Secretary of Energy has made efficiency one of his new priorities. So this is something that we should and can do. We often lament the fact that there's not much bipartisanship around this place and not much is getting done, and it's true. It's true. The budget agreement was good this week. We had to do something. Far from perfect, as I've said, even though at the end I voted for it because I do think we needed to move forward on this issue and have a budget for the first time in 4 years in this place. But this is an example of legislation that's actually something bipartisan positive to help move the country forward. Any true all-of-the-above energy strategy has to include not just producing more energy, but also using that energy more efficiently. Produce more, use less. That's good for jobs, good for taxpayers, good for the environment.